Fear has been the invisible leash holding humanity back since the beginning of time. It's the reason people stay in jobs they hate, avoid relationships they long for, and silence truths they desperately want to speak. Fear convinces us that safety is more important than freedom, that comfort is better than growth, that uncertainty is a danger to be avoided rather than a reality to be embraced. But when you look back at history, you find that the people who left their mark on the world weren't those who had no reason to be afraid, they were the ones who acted in spite of it, and often because of it. And among the greatest examples of this fearlessness, you find the Stoics, men and women who, for over 2,000 years, have been teaching a radical idea, that fear can be conquered not by fighting it, but by understanding it. The Stoics never claimed that fear didn't exist. They weren't delusional or detached from reality. They knew that fear is part of the human condition. But they also knew that most of what we fear is not based on truth, it's based on stories we tell ourselves. Epictetus, a man born into slavery, knew firsthand what it was like to live under the threat of pain, humiliation, and loss. Yet he taught his students that fear is almost always a projection into the future, an emotional reaction to something that hasn't even happened yet. Men are disturbed not by things, he said, but by the views they take of them. In other words, what we fear isn't the event itself, but our interpretation of it. Think about it, when you fear failure, you're not afraid of the actual moment of failure. You're afraid of the judgment that will follow, the shame you'll feel, the loss of status or opportunity. When you fear rejection, you're not afraid of hearing the word no, you're afraid of the story you'll tell yourself afterward, that you're not good enough, that you're unworthy of love, that you've been exposed as inadequate. The Stoics understood that if you can separate the fact from the interpretation, you strip fear of its power. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, spent much of his life on battlefields, facing political betrayal, personal loss, and the ever-present threat of death. And yet, his private writings, never intended for anyone else's eyes, are filled not with panic or despair, but with calm reasoning and acceptance. He wrote to himself as a reminder, death is natural, pain is temporary, and the only thing truly within your control is your own mind. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Fear loses its grip when you realize that the worst it can do is make you suffer in imagination before reality even arrives. The Stoics had a method for this. They called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Every day, they would imagine the worst-case scenarios, losing their wealth, being exiled, falling ill, even dying. Not as a way to become pessimistic, but to build psychological immunity. If you've already faced the possibility of loss in your mind, if you've rehearsed it and accepted it, then when reality delivers a blow, it's far less devastating. Fear thrives in the unknown, but once you've looked the unknown in the eye, it's no longer a shadow, it's a shape you recognize. Modern people run from fear. We numb it with distractions, we drown it in entertainment, we silence it with temporary pleasures. But fear doesn't go away just because you look the other way, it waits. And when it returns, it's often bigger, louder, and stronger. The Stoics did the opposite, they turned toward it. They invited it in. They examined it like a scientist studying a rare specimen. And in doing so, they realized something profound: fear is not a signal to stop, it's a signal to prepare. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest and most influential men, wrote essays and letters that still strike at the heart of human weakness today. He told us, we are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. If you think about your own life, you'll see how true this is. How many sleepless nights have you spent worrying about something that never happened? How many opportunities have you missed because you let fear dictate your actions? How many times have you built entire scenarios in your head only to find that reality was far less terrible than you imagined? The Stoics didn't just theorize about this, they lived it. They faced exile, betrayal, poverty, injury, and death without losing their composure. Not because they were superhuman, but because they practiced separating what they could control from what they couldn't. Fear often comes from trying to control the uncontrollable. We fear death because we can't prevent it. We fear loss because we can't predict it. We fear change because we can't manage every outcome. But the Stoics learned to release that need for control. They anchored themselves only to what was theirs, their thoughts, their actions, This is why the Stoics could walk into danger without hesitation. Not because they believed they were safe, but because they knew that even if the worst happened, their mind would remain free. Epictetus put it simply, "You may fetter my leg, but not even Zeus has the power to break my freedom of choice." Fear feeds on the belief that something outside yourself can destroy you. The Stoics rejected that entirely. In today's world, fear often disguises itself as practicality. We tell ourselves we're just being realistic when we don't chase a dream. We say we're just being careful when we avoid difficult conversations. We call it being sensible when we stay in our comfort zone. The modern world rewards the fearful. It sells you insurance for every possibility, offers you comfort at every turn, gives you endless ways to hide from the rawness of life. But comfort is a cage. The Stoics chose freedom. They chose to expose themselves to difficulty, to embrace voluntary discomfort, to practice poverty, to walk toward the very things most people avoid. They did this so that when hardship inevitably arrived, it found them ready. And this is why Stoics never fear anything, not because nothing can harm them, but because they have redefined what harm means. To them, harm is not losing money, or status, or even life. Harm is losing integrity, betraying your principles, abandoning your reason. As long as they held on to these, nothing else could truly damage them. The question for us is simple: do we want to live as slaves to fear, or do we want to reclaim our minds? Because fear will always exist, but so will courage. The Stoics left us a choice, the same choice they made daily, to let fear dictate our actions, or to stand firm and act with virtue, no matter the cost. If you decide today to face fear head-on, to welcome discomfort, to embrace uncertainty, to detach from outcomes, you'll find that the world becomes a far less frightening place. Not because it's any safer, but because you have become stronger. And when you reach that point, fear becomes not an enemy, but a teacher. It points you toward the places you need to grow. It shows you where you are still clinging too tightly, where you still lack trust in your own resilience. Follow it, not to obey it, but to overcome it. That is the Stoic way. That is how they lived without fear. And it is how you can too.